Hello everybody and welcome back to the second shelf. It's the 1st of August today, so it's time for my August TBR. And for those of you who might be new to the channel, because I've gained quite some subscribers, thank you very much for joining and for subscribing. But for those of you who might be new, a TBR for the purpose of this video means to be released. So at the beginning of each month or just at the end of the previous month, I look at the new releases and then I pick a couple, 4, 5, 6 books that I personally find interesting, and I present them to you in the hope that you might find them interesting as well. And we start off with literary fiction, and the first book I'm excited about all the books, of course, otherwise I wouldn't present them to you. But this one sort of holds a special place in my heart, and that is Miriam Toews' new book, Women Talking, which will come out the 21st of August. Now, Miriam Toews is a Canadian author, and I came across her work by chance, I think maybe 2 years ago, when I read her 5th novel, or even 6th novel, All My Puny Sorrows, about 2 sisters, one a very successful artist suffering from severe depression and trying to kill herself more than once, and the sibling who is, not from the outside, not very successful life, divorced and no job, and, but very happy, and the conflict between those 2 sisters. I thought this was a brilliant book. The writing was fantastic, so I checked out more of her work, and now she comes out with a new novel. Now, before I go into the detail of the story, you have to know that Miriam Toews herself comes from a Mennonite background. Mennonites is a Christian, a small Christian church, about 1.8 million believers all over the world, which actually originated in Holland from Minos Simons. It's I don't know whether you can call it a fundamentalist church, but a conservative church. And Miriam Toews, in her previous books, a couple of times she wrote about that denomination, especially in Complicated Kindness in 2004, which was her breakthrough book, in which she depicts a young a girl who wants to break away from this very conservative community. And in her new book again, she takes the subject of Mennonite culture or community, and she based this novel on true events. What I read between 2005 and 2009 in one particular colony, Mennonite colony, more than 100 women were raped, supposedly by demons, in order to clean them from their sins. But of course, that turned out not to be true. They were drugged by the men of the community and raped and abused by them. Now, that's the premise that from real life that Miriam Toews took. And then she writes a story about what could have happened, in the sense that the women start talking with each other about these events. That's why the novel is called Women Talking. Now, that seems quite a serious topic, but I'm sure that in the hands of Miriam Toews, it will be a wonderful book, and I'm really looking forward to reading it. We stay with literary fiction for the second book I want to present to you, and that is Pat Barker's new novel, The Silence of the Girls, which will be published on the 30th of August. Now, if you're following my channel for any length of time, you know that I do not like, in fact, I despise books with girl in the title. At least if it's not about girls, but about women. And 99% of the books with girl in the title is about women, young women, but still. But I make an exception this time for Pat Barker because I love her work so much. Pat Barker is a writer from Yorkshire. She was born in 1943, and she wrote, in my opinion, the best books about the First World War, the Regeneration series. So if you have never heard of Pat Barker, check out the Regeneration series. It's fantastic. It's not an easy read about the First World War, but it's really, really very good. So this new book, The Silence of the Girls, is has something to do with war, because Pat Barker's work, if you look at her books, most of them deal with war one way or the other. And this one is a retelling. Not, no, retelling is not true. It's about the Trojan War after the Greeks have won. So Troy has fallen. So it's after the war. That's why it's not really a retelling, but it's set in that mystical world. And Pat Barker sets the book, or tells the book, from the perspective of the captured women, the former queen or princesses of Troy. They were captured and given to the winning, kings and military leaders as slaves. So, from what I understand, the book tells their story. That's why I think the title is The Silence of the Girls, because we, in normal history, if we read the Iliad or books about the Iliad, that's not a subject that is talked about a lot. So I'm really looking forward to what Pat Barker does with that subject. I know that she can really write about war and conflict and the consequences of war. So I'm curious to see what she makes of the aftermath of the Trojan War from the perspective of the enslaved women. We move on to historical fiction, and the book I'm mentioning you probably have heard of, because it has been longlisted for the Man Booker Prize, which was announced about a week ago, and that is Essie Adutian, Washington Black. The book will come out on the 30th of August as well. Essie Adutian is a Canadian writer with Ghanaian roots, and one of her previous books, Half-Blood Blues, has already also been nominated for the Man Booker. It was on the shortlist in 2011. It's a book about 1940s Paris and the jazz and blues scene there. And she returns to historical fiction with this new book, Washington Black, which is set in the 1830s in Barbados on a sugar plantation. And two English or British brothers, the Wild brothers, arrive there as masters. And then the story centers around a young slave, an 11-year-old boy, Washington, and he is given the task, if you can call it that at all, of being the personal servant of one of the brothers, Christopher Wilde. And then the book develops, from what I've read and from the reviews I read, more as an adventure story than as a look at slavery. So there's obviously something is happening, a murder takes place, and then Christopher Wilde and Washington, they flee and they go across the country, have all kinds of adventures. I don't know whether this description of adventure story is completely correct, but that's what I've read. But like I said, the book was longlisted for the Man Booker, and I'm interested in the subject. I wasn't too taken with Half-Blood Blues. It's just not my kind of scenery, my kind of book. But I liked the writing well enough of Essie Adutian. So I'm looking forward to her new book, Washington Black, coming out 30th of August. Like I said, I'm repeating myself again. We move on to translated fiction, although the next book is also historical fiction in a way. And that book is Kyung-Sook Shin, The Court Dancer, which will come out on the 7th of August and which has been translated from the Korean by Anton Hur. The book was originally published in South Korea almost 10 years ago. Kyung-Sook Shin is quite a very successful South Korean writer. Many of her books have been translated into English. This one obviously took a while, but now it will be published in English. It's set in the Korean Empire between, let's say, the end of the 19th century, the beginning of the 20th century. And we follow a young French diplomat, the first diplomat to ever come to the court of the Empress in Korea. And there he falls in love with Yi Jin, who is an orphan but was adopted by the Empress and is a revered dancer, a court dancer, hence the title. The young French diplomat gets the permission to take his lover with him to France. Yi Jin lives there in Belle Epoque Paris, translating books from the Korean into French, but then things go wrong somehow. I don't know how, but it sounds interesting. I have not read nearly enough books coming from Asia, especially South Korea. So I'm really looking forward to this translated work. The time period sounds fascinating. The story sounds really interesting. So I hope the book will live up to its promise. And as always, we end the TBR with sci-fi. I love sci-fi. And this time I chose Martha Wells' Rogue Protocol, which will come out on the 7th of August and which is the third in a series of novellas, The Murderbot Diaries. Now, Martha Wells is an American author living in Texas, and she's mainly known, you might know her, but then from her fantasy novels and series, or from her YA books. But she's also written sci-fi, and this series, I love this series. It's 3 short novellas. The first came out, All Systems Red, came out last year. The second, Artificial Condition, earlier this year. And now the third, and I think final one, in August. The series follows an artificial intelligence unit, a security unit, who calls himself, it's a droid, and he refers to himself, if you can say he, maybe I should say they, refer to themselves as Murderbot. And we follow his adventures when he goes investigating. And in the third book, from what I understood, he goes to a space station, Milu, and there he has to investigate the murky past of a corporation. I read these books mainly for the main character. He's the Murderbot is such a crabby, ill-humored, introverted, funny main character. I think it's hilarious. So if you're into this kind of stuff, maybe you want to read the whole series at once, because it's only one thick book, about 400 or 500 pages if you read all 3 of them. But you can read them as standalone, so maybe you want to try the third one, Rogue Protocol, and see whether you like it. So this was it for my August TBR. Thank you very much for watching. I hope you've enjoyed the books I've chosen. Let me know down below whether any of the books interest you, or whether you have any new releases in August that you are excited about. And I'll talk to you soon in my next video. Bye-bye.